We operate on a heavily reinforced assumption: expose a generation of adolescents to smartphones and their mental health declines. The 2026 World Happiness Report reveals a sharp contradiction to that rule. Across 85 of the 136 countries tracked in the data, life evaluations for the under 25 demographic are higher today than they were 20 years ago. This chart tracks global youth happiness from 2006 to 2025. The aggregate global average trends steadily upward, but when we isolate Western Europe and the NANS region, an acronym for the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, the red line breaks off and plummets downward, registering a severe 0.86-point collapse. Measuring the change in youth happiness over the last 2 decades, the NANS region now ranks near the absolute bottom of the dataset, setting between 122 and 133 out of 136 countries. Social media prevalence is a global constant. If the blunt metric of screen time universally damaged human psychology, the decline would appear in all regions. The localized nature of this crisis indicates the harm relies on other intersecting variables. Treating digital technology as a uniform monolith conceals a highly specific geographic crisis. Diagnosing the collapse requires a forensic examination of platform architecture and how specific cultures interact with it. To interpret this data accurately, we must differentiate between fleeting daily emotions, like anger or laughter on a given Tuesday, and structural life evaluations. The researchers measure structural well-being using the Cantril ladder. This is a 0 to 10 scale, where respondents evaluate their current life as a whole, with 0 representing the worst possible life and 10 representing the best. This graphic shows the complex horizontal bar charts researchers use to map national happiness. Before examining digital habits, they first account for the macroeconomic environments shaping these populations. The model controls for 6 foundational variables: GDP per capita, social support, healthy life expectancy, freedom to make life choices, generosity, and perceptions of corruption. Even after controlling for these 6 metrics, a significant unexplained negative residual remains, specifically for youth in the English-speaking world. The economic data cannot account for the drop. Researchers hypothesize that the rapid adoption of always available digital media in the early 2010s provides the missing explanatory variable. Testing this hypothesis requires cross-referencing this macroeconomic baseline against highly detailed global digital consumption patterns. The OECD's PISA survey provides the necessary behavioral data. PISA is a massive academic and well-being study evaluating 270,000 15-year-olds across 47 countries. This scatter plot maps hours of daily use against life satisfaction. The data reveals a clear baseline finding: life satisfaction does not peak at 0 usage. It actually peaks at low social media use, specifically under 1 hour a day. Past that 1 hour mark, the curve establishes a steep downward trajectory. Life evaluations drop aggressively as daily usage scales upward. The demographic extreme exists among girls in Western Europe. At 7 or more hours of daily usage, they experience almost a full point drop on the Cantril scale. By contrast, among boys outside of Western Europe, the drop in life satisfaction at identical extreme usage levels is essentially 0. This discrepancy forces a separation of screen time into 2 distinct operational categories: time spent using the internet, for communication, reading the news, learning, and content creation, correlates with higher life satisfaction scores. Active, intentional digital participation supports psychological well-being. The measurable harm is generated specifically by passive, consumptive digital behaviors. The data from Latin America presents a critical anomaly. The region exhibits high overall social media usage, but concurrently possesses rising youth happiness. Resolving this anomaly requires isolating how these specific populations interact with the technology, compared to users in the NANS region. Platforms designed primarily to facilitate direct social connections and messaging show a clear positive association with happiness. This diagram compares the 2 architectures. On the left, 2-way communication networks. On the right, algorithmic feeds driven by visually comparative influencer content. Heavy usage of the algorithmic architecture heavily correlates with negative life evaluations. The final accelerating variable in this model is peer group saturation. This is the threshold at which a specific demographic is so densely populated on a platform that non-participation becomes socially isolating. Internet use remains broadly beneficial when peer exposure is low. It becomes actively harmful only after algorithmic social media heavily saturates an individual's specific demographic peer group. The psychological crisis is not triggered by the mere existence of the internet. It occurs when specific algorithmic curation reaches critical mass within a susceptible peer group. Chapter 6 of the report shifts the lens to behavioral economics, examining data gathered from U.S. college cohorts. The data poses a deep structural paradox. Why do populations heavily consume digital products they know quantifiably lower their life evaluations? The consumption is highly defensive. Individuals extract negative welfare from the platforms, but continue to log on strictly because their peers are already there. Economists classify this as a negative non-user externality. This is a condition where a product imposes a direct cost, often social exclusion, on people who abstain from using it. This systems diagram illustrates the empirical proof. Users extract negative welfare, yet continue usage due to network effects. Crucially, users would willingly pay to have platforms like Instagram and TikTok eliminated from their communities entirely. This closed loop demonstrates algorithmic social media usage is no longer an individual choice. It functions as a collective trap. Because algorithmic social media operates as a structural collective action problem, individual solutions like temporary digital detoxes are entirely ineffective at repairing the baseline damage. Governments are interpreting this international data and beginning to act on the policy implications. In late 2025, the Australian government aggressively intervened, increasing the age limit for 10 separate social media platforms to 16. Denmark, France, and Spain are currently structuring similar regulatory sweeps. But poor scientific synthesis during this policymaking phase carries a high risk. Blunt, platform-agnostic age bands might inadvertently eliminate the communication and learning vectors that actively improve adolescent well-being. The data points toward legislation that targets specific platform architectures, regulating algorithmic curation and infinite scroll mechanics directly, rather than applying blunt, blanket restrictions to the internet itself. Treating the technology as a population-level environmental hazard aligns the response with established product safety standards. Securing youth well-being requires lifting the burden of safety off the individual adolescent's well-being and placing it squarely on the underlying architecture of the digital platforms.